put the lights up if you want. It's okay. When God created us, it says in Genesis 1, 26 and 27, that God created us 3 times. It was mentioned at that time. He created us, thank you, on his image and likeness. That word, the image, has been a word that a lot of people over the ages have tried to understand. And many of these meanings are not necessarily mutually exclusive. A lot of these meanings, complement each other. But one meaning in particular that I found very, very pertinent is how God created us as rational, intelligent agents. If anyone studies a little bit the idea of knowledge, epistemology, and the idea of personhood, okay? That word agency is a very important word. In fact, anyone who studied intelligent design, the word agency comes up quite a bit in the intelligent design hypothesis or thesis. What does it mean to be an intelligent agent? As an agent, that actually entails on it several different things. First of all, there's input, there's output. There's things given. There's independency, okay? There's decisions, there are choices. An agent also has awareness of the consequences of the choices of what they've made. When I think about actually the blessings of God, I actually do believe this idea of agency is one of the biggest out of all of them. You know why? Although it actually has its blessings and it has its, I'm not going to say curses, but it has its challenges. Because when God gave us that agency, he gives us a chance to some extent, choose our own destiny. And that is very liberating. Yeah, it is a little bit daunting. It's like, hey, what you're going to choose is going to matter a lot. Okay? But also it's very refreshing that to some extent, I have control over my destiny. In fact, anyone who has dealt with depression, they will tell you one of the first factors that depressed people go through that causes depression is the feeling of lack of control. Okay, when they lose the feeling that they can control the outcome of what they're going through, that's the beginning of a depression. But the fact that God gave us that agency not only tells us he's given us the freedom of choice, but also the freedom to learn from our mistakes. As an agent, I can own up to my own mistakes, and it's actually very liberating when I own up to my own mistakes in the past, because then I'm not projecting those mistakes on other people, on other circumstances, and I'm always being haunted by those circumstances and what has happened, but yet I'm owning up to it, okay? And I'm learning from it, and I'm moving forward. You see, that idea of actually being an agent, being a rationally independent agent is very, very liberating. So why am I bringing this in? It's not just for a philosophical reason, because at this point, as each one of us around here, okay, the army of God, as you go back in our lives, as you go back to your own work, to your own school, to your own family, to your own church, each one of us is Christ. But each one of us is not only Christ, each one of us is an independent agent who has the ability and has the willingness and the chance and the choice to reflect to everyone else that choice. Let's go back to the theme of the conference. What is the theme of the conference? The choice to live through death. So the final question I want to come up with today. Do we have a chance by our choices to point out to the world what is worth living for? Let me repeat this again. Do we have an ability to project to the world around us, you name it, the church that you serve in, the high school, the college kids you serve, your family, your co-workers, the society, politicians, the media, you name it, would we be able to give them a chance to understand what is worth living for? Because they always say, what you always consider worth dying for is what you're living for. I'm going to say this again. What you always consider worth dying for is what you actually are living for. So, I always said, I don't think the issue is, do you choose life or death? I think everyone chooses life. Do you choose me or not? I think you would choose me. It has to be self-interest. I think the problem is in how you define the me, okay, and how you define life. And I think this is the whole point of what we started. I want to start in the beginning defining, okay, what is life as the Bible taught us? What is death as the world tries to scare us? And then I try to make a case that actually Christ came to prove to the world back then and now that their understanding of life and death is foolish. And I try to prove to us that what they call the foolishness of God is the wisdom. What they call the weakness of God being crucified on the cross is absolute power. What they thought of a powerful God who would just decimate and dominate is not a powerful God. A powerful God is a God who loves. So on the cross, God, in the form of his Son, restored to us the understanding of what life truly is. And in it, he restored to us the power. And then the fourth talk, we talked a little bit about the struggle of me. And does that choice that God has given me, does that go in conflict with me? And I made the case that actually if we truly understood ourselves and what God has invited to, there was really no conflict. The world is what's really giving us that conflict sometimes when we really come and just focus on what would preserve us. And the call yesterday was to ignore a little bit of that self-preservation and go into that self-expansion. So then, what choices are we making? And today I'm going to ask you to consider the choice to die. Before Christ went to the cross, let's read this together because it's a beautiful verse. And I have to admit something. Every time I read the Bible, I get surprised by things that I, have read so many times. And almost gets fixated in your mind. It's like, you already know it. I already know it. I already this verse, I know it. We know it to heart. But then if you go and read it again, you find to discover something. It's like, oh, when did this get added on? It's like, it was not added on. This has actually been there for a while. Okay? So here's what really interests me about this. Here's what Christ told them. Very truly, I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies. I knew this very well. This is the part I never actually contemplated on. It remains just a single grain. In fact, some translations like it remains by itself. It remains alone. Okay? But if it dies, it bears much fruit. And it struck me, you know what? I never actually paid attention to that middle phrase. It remains just a single grain. And that exactly what the problem is with modern understanding of me. When the me just goes by itself and tries to preserve itself, it's anti-death, it's anti-kind of giving itself to something else. You know what? It may preserve itself, but remain always what? A single grain. In another translation, it would remain alone. But if it would die, then it would come up with much fruit. So, very briefly, let's go to the seed. When you look at a seed, what happens in the seed? And let's bring it down to earth. Literally and metaphorically. When you look at a seed, first of all, you start with the ground. What's in the ground? Soil. What else? Rocks. Thorns. A lot of things. The ground is not glorious. The ground, in fact, we call it dirt. Right? The ground tends to be a bit of like de-identifying. It kind of de-identifies because like when a seed goes into it, it loses almost for an instant its identity. It disappears for a while. The ground, any ground that you are preparing for the soil, okay, what do you have to do in it? Okay, you have to till it, okay? You take, almost a plow, and you plow it over and over. You're shaking it upside down. You're taking everything in it. You are hurting the ground. If we look at us as a seed, when God gave us the sense of okay, we have to go back and be seeds. The ground that we go in, sometimes we go in, we're always looking for the fruit, for the glory, for the end result, but we fail to realize that the ground we're going into, you know what? It's dirty. It's painful. It hurts. It's not glorious at all. When Christ came to incarnate, to him this was dirt. But that was the ground. And for us, a lot of times when we pick and choose where we want to be seeds, we have a certain set of ground in our mind. I want to be just in a pot, okay? In a pot that is very well tended and very well cared for. But the reality is that as the ground gets to be prepared, it goes through a lot of pain. As our lives get to be prepared for what God is bringing to us, our grounds are going to be shaken upside down. A lot of us go through trials and tribulations. A lot of us go through emotional distress. A lot of us go through health, through family. It happens to all of us. But what if I told you that that's God's way of taking the ground that your seed is going to be planted in, and he's plowing it through? It is painful. But unless it's plowed through, what is going to happen? All the rocks, all the thorns, or the thistles that are in your ground that your seed is going to be planted in is going to choke that seed. So when we get that pain, when we get those events that happen in our lives, that is God's way of plowing through to make our ground fertile. You look at the seed. Seed is very small. Sometimes we look at ourselves and we say, I have nothing to offer. I'm pretty small. I'm just a really small player in this field. But what you don't realize and what you forget in the smallness of what you have, the power of God, the power of the Spirit, the power of life in that seed is beyond itself. And that's what God puts in us. The reason why he said, if you take that kernel of wheat and let it die, because it is small, but that power in it, even though it is small, is able to break ground. You see this? That's a lot of power. However, the seed, when it gets to be put in, it has a conscious decision to die. Metaphorically. There is an intelligent agent who puts the seed in the ground, right? Who decides when this seed is going to go in the ground, it's going to disappear for some time. It's going to die. Your time as your seed is being put into the ground, you might feel that you're dead. You might feel that you're completely disappeared. You have lost your glory. You've lost your power. You've lost everything. Also, look at the metaphor of the seed. When the seed goes into the ground, when your seed goes into the ground, the seed becomes patiently dependent on somebody outside of itself to water it. There's somebody called God who waters you. But yet you have trust and faith that even though that your seed is in the ground waiting for it to break ground and to bring this fruit, you're patiently waiting on God. Even though you might feel yourself, you're dying, like St. Paul said, inside us we feel that we're dying every day, but the outside is being renewed. So every day that seed could be dying, but it's patiently trusting that there is a farmer, there is a transcendent farmer out there called God who's watering until it happens. Some seeds grow fast. Other seeds, because of their innate power, can take years. In fact, one of the most amazing ones of them, when you look at them, is the Chinese bamboo. And you might have heard this before. The Chinese bamboo seed is a very interesting seed. Because when it gets planted, people who know about it For 5 years, not a single growth comes out of it. For 5 years. But once it grows, in literally a matter of 6 to 8 weeks, it can grow up to 90 feet. 90 feet. Go and read about it. It's a very interesting plant. But for 5 years, nothing happens. But when it breaks ground, it breaks ground. And God has his own timing, by the way. One thing that I've always amazed as I study the characters of the Bible is the timing of how things happen. People sometimes don't realize this. So does anyone know what is the time gap or the time lapse between Paul's conversion, Paul seeing Christ, he saw Christ, okay, to his first missionary trip? So I saw Christ. If I saw Christ, I'll be ready, to go on every single pulpit tomorrow and talk about, hey, I've seen Christ. What is the time lag between Paul seeing Christ and doing his first missionary trip? 14 years. 14 years. Talk about a seed. Talk about a seed. Sometimes we are impatient with witnessing. Sometimes we're impatient with what we feel like, I ought to do right now. I've seen something, but God has his own timing. Sometimes we're tempted that we want to go to the glorious thing that we feel we're called to. And God is not denying us what we're called to. He's telling us the timing of when that seed breaks ground is up to him. Because during that period of time, he's patiently watering, he's patiently nurturing, that seed. It could come up after 1 year, it could come up like a Chinese bamboo after 5 years, but when it comes out, it bursts out of the ground. But during this period of time, as a seed, yes, you are dying, your death doesn't have the glory, but you're patiently trusting, a God who will bring you out. The seed knows how to die. When Christ said, if the kernel of wheat does not die, it cannot come up to be a tree with a lot of fruit. When I'm going to come to all of us today and say, maybe, as true believers, because of our true understanding of what death is and our mindfulness of death, we can show the world what is worth living for. And maybe we need to come back in the last 2 weeks of this Lent, as we come to the Passion Week, come and ask ourselves, and I know Abuna talked about this a little bit, but are you mindful of your death? And by the way, that is not fatalistic, that is realistic. That is not suicidal, that is reality. In fact, Plato was one of the very first people who said that the beginning of philosophy, the beginning of understanding, is mindfulness of death. Is mindfulness of this last step of where you would come. Maybe one of our biggest problems right now, that in our day, the way that we're living, we're actually losing the right mind of how to live and how to die. When Christ said, whoever wants to save his life, he loses it. If you do not choose to die, you will be forced to die. The Desert Father said, whoever has died once cannot die again. There's a Jewish wisdom that says each one of us has to hold a card in their hand. Look at it every day. On one side of this card, it is written, you are but dust. On the other side of the card is written, for you the world was created. Two sides of the same coin, reflecting the same exact reality that God tells us. We're just a speck in this universe, even less than that. But for that speck, God created the universe. It's an amazing balance that keeps things into perspective. So being mindful of death is not fatalistic. It is very realistic. I'm afraid that sometimes, my friends, we are like this man. We are true believers. We are Christians. We've been baptized. We live in a church. But this man was a man that Christ talked about in a parable. A man who accumulated a lot. A man who worried a lot. A man who boasted a lot. A man who ignored a lot. All these actions describe us. Right? Accumulated, boasted, and the same breath ignored. Right? It's very interesting when you look at the story. God did not condemn this man as evil. He didn't say he was evil. Didn't say he was bad. Didn't say he was, the son of perdition. What was the description he gave to him? Foolish. Fool. That's it. He said he's a fool. What does that tell you? It tells you that God was not necessarily criticizing our choices and saying, that was a really, really, really bad mistake with your choices. He said it was just a foolish choice. See the difference? There's a wise choice, but there's a foolish choice. It rarely strikes me that this is how God described him. And that's, I think, sometimes how God describes us. It's not necessarily that he's going to say, your use of your time, your use of your money, your use of your talent, your use of your resources, everything that God has given you, okay? You are saved. You are saved by the blood of Christ. But when we're all going to meet God one day face to face, some of us, he's going to say, I think you were very foolish with your choice of what you've done. I still love you, you're saved, okay? But you're foolish. You're foolish. Some people can actually, that foolishness can take them to an extent that they would completely lose their salvation, okay? But some other people might be still saved, but God will tell them is like, I gave you a lot. Too much has been given, much will be asked. So God might come one day and tell us, you know what? That was foolish. The question at this point, how can we choose to die in order to live? If you look at your life as a game of Monopoly, okay? There's a very interesting book if anyone wants to read it. But he bases actually the wisdom of life in a Christian sense on the game of Monopoly. In the game of Monopoly, we're all playing against each other. To some extent, it's a zero-sum game. I win, you lose. I accumulate wealth. You're now poor. You're indebted to me. I have a lot of hotels. I have a lot of banks. A lot of props. Okay? What happens at the end of the game? It all goes back into the box. What happens at the end of your life? It all goes back into the box. Life is a game of Monopoly. Life is a game of Monopoly. There are winners and there are losers. So you'll end up having to make a choice. What is it? So as we bring the full circle, there's a great Christian writer in the 1940s and 50s by the name of Richard Niebuhr, who wrote an amazing book about Christ and culture. Richard Niebuhr actually tried to bring up this question of evangelism. How do we as Christians really interact with culture? And he actually gave it a little bit of different classifications. And he said, well, some of us think of Christ against culture. That Christ is the main one to actually say to culture, you guys are going to burn in hell. Some do that. Others present Christ above culture, okay, in a sense of a superior way. Others present Christ of culture, very kind of integrated, almost like homogenizing it to a point that Christ loses himself in the culture. But by the analogy of the seed, I'm trying to present to you a case of Christ in culture. Because the seed goes in with its power, with its patience, with its trust, with the life in it, that Holy Spirit in it, and then transforms the culture by the power that is in it. And I want to bring it to 3 levels of application. And please remember what I just said. If we can prove to the world what is worth dying for, maybe we'll be able to convince them what is worth living for. If we can prove to people around us what is worth dying for, maybe we can change how they live. Death in witness. I look at the story and I thank God that in a time when we lost perspective of how to be witnesses, maybe not all of us are going to go to that extreme. But I thank God for these people that gave us a chance to understand what is worth dying for. To me, those are very unique characters. If any one of you has got the chance to read the book that was published about them, that book would strike you very, very interestingly. And I'll tell you why. Because the guy is a German author. He doesn't sugarcoat things. And I found it very interesting in his book. And please do not take it in the wrong way. I'm just putting the plain facts out there. He was not necessarily as complimenting as I would have liked to see to the leadership of the country or of the church. Not necessarily. He didn't feel necessarily that they had the power that they, claimed. But yet in his description, he described the lives of these 21 people and their families in a way that was so unbelievable. Because he talked about those 21 martyrs and their families in the way that their lives, before going to Libya, reflected in them that mentality of life and death. Their choices were made years before they got to Libya. I'm going to say this again. We think that in the moment of their death, they made the choice to die. No, my friends. They made the choice to die many years before they got to Libya. So when they got to Libya, the choice for death was, I won't say easy. I don't think it's easy. But it was conceivable. When he was talking to their families, when he was talking to that culture that now we're far removed from here in the Western world, you can clearly get a sense as you read the book, it's a hard read at times, okay, that these people were ready, they knew. You know what's really unique about those people, which is very different, for example, than the martyrs who died, let's say, in the bombings of the churches? Those guys had 3 months to change their mind. The 3 months times, 30 days times 24 hours times number of minutes. If I make a conscious decision every single second of my life, they had a conscious decision every single second of those 3 months to change their mind and to save their lives. And maybe, I would say, I don't know if anyone would have blamed them because, you know what, hey, a lot of us could, deny and come back and repent. It happened in the history and the church accepted those people. But for them to go through that choice of witnessing to the point that the Western world and the whole point of how, this is unbelievable, that an army of evil would take a propaganda to instill fear, and that same tool, God would use it to be a tool of witness for the whole world to look at what is worth dying for. Because then a lot of Westerners look at this and say, you know what? Was it really worth dying for that? What am I missing? And you find in this German journalist at the end a true confession of him saying, now I understand why they did that. I admire it. But their witness changed people. Their witness changed a lot of Christians in this country who are living and dying by a prosperity gospel. That, you know what, if God loves me, then God is going to give me everything. I'm going to be rich, healthy, famous, etc. It changed them because they witnessed at that point. don't know if anyone has seen this, but I think this is an amazing witness. This is Pope Francis called for a meeting for the South Sudan leaders. It was supposedly a meeting just to make to broker a peace treaty. At the end of the meeting, he goes and bends down and kisses the feet of every single one of those South Sudanese leaders. The one on the left there is Salva Kiir, who's the one who actually kind of had the revolution against Sudan, or the separation. And he goes and kisses all of them. He's 82 years old. Okay? He goes and kisses their feet. They're in shock. This happened 2 days ago. To me, we witness to people not just by what we say, but by how we act. We witness to people by what we are willing to do. I know the question that was asked about forgiveness. Sometimes in our human capacity, there's no way for us to do that. But in the spirit capacity, we would really be pushed out of our comfort zone to witness for Christ. Death in service. The choice of serving those who no one wants to serve. As a church, there are many people we don't know how to serve. The addicts, the people who are drunk, those who want to choose abortion, the homosexuals, those who want to kill their life. Maybe we're unable to serve them because we're too self-righteous to even make an impact on them. Maybe we're unable to serve them because we don't have an understanding of what it means a seed needs to die. Maybe we're unable to serve them because God has not given us the grace because we don't deserve even to serve them. Maybe we're unable to serve them because for us, service is still something glorious we look after. Maybe we're unable to reach the homosexual or the feminists because we do not even understand what does it mean to die for them. It is very easy for us to judge them. It's very easy for us to label them. It's very easy for us to say a condemnation on them. But maybe we don't even know how to serve them. Maybe God has not given us the grace to serve them because we've not even put our seed in the ground and willing to lay it down. I always tell people, when God truly believes that we are worthy of the grace to serve all these outcasts to the church, He's going to give us the grace in their eyes to serve them. But until we die, we'll never be able to reach them. Maybe we demand too much in a service, results. Maybe we demand fruits. Maybe we demand gratification. Maybe we have kind of put missions, overseas missions, as an idol, and I'll be the first to tell you that. And yet the people who need to be served most are in our backyard, are in our churches. Maybe the people that we need to look most to are the people when we go into the church and have been missing for a long time. Maybe the ones that we need to reach out to are people that we need to look into their eyes and say, how are you doing? Maybe the families that are having problems. Maybe the families that have handicapped kids. My daughter goes to serve in an evangelical church right next to us that has a service once a month. It's called Barnabas Respite. So anyone knows about the character of Barnabas, he's kind of the comforter. He's the behind-the-scenes guy. And in this service, it's a big evangelical church, they decided as a church to give the families who have kids with special needs a date night. So once a month, they bring all these kids. There are 70 kids. 70. And each one of those kids needs at least one or two people with them. Okay? So my daughter, who's 14, she loves to go there every month.
this is for her the best thing that she absolutely loves. But I love that idea. I love that idea. That they decided, you know what, the families, they're struggling day in and day out. And as a church, they said, you know what, you deserve a date night once a month. What if I did that? What if we as a church allow God to open our eyes like he opened the eyes of the blind man today, to see those who are around us, and identify just one person who needs that service? Witness in our profession. When our jobs, unfortunately, right now have turned from our occupation to become our preoccupation. When our jobs have become for us what define us, what give us the metrics, the KPIs. Sorry, I had to make fun of it. When our jobs are not necessarily only a way for us to witness to God, but a way to actually prove that sometimes God does not exist, because we're so enamored with ourselves. The bottom line, God does not want, how many are we here? 200? God does not want 200 priests. God wants 200 witnesses to him who are carrying the priestly ministry and witnessing and service in their hearts and take it to their works and to their colleges and deliver that. You know what's the role of the priest? The role of the priest is to serve as an axis between the people and God. He's the axis point. He's the channel. He's the channel through which the grace flows back and forth. What if I told you that that spirit is for all of us? When it talks about in the New Testament, you know, a kingdom of priesthood, what does that mean? That God through us gives each one of us that access channel, that you become that grace for the people around you, and they become for you. So how to bring this all together? God created us with eternity set in our life. It says in Ecclesiastes, he set eternity in their hearts. I think there is a reason why we struggle. Because we know what lays ahead of us. We know what we're up for. And we're struggling to get to that. He put the eternity in us, and he put life in us. But unfortunately, and in fact, actually, when you go back to that Ecclesiastes, he has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in their heart, human heart. It is not just that he put it. He made it so aesthetically beautiful that we actually enjoy it. You remember when I talked, yesterday about the power of desires? Sometimes we think that being with God is not fun. Sometimes we think that being with God is like almost like a tooth that needs to be pulled out. That's sad. Because honestly, being with God and understanding this whole dynamics is unbelievably exciting, unbelievably motivating, unbelievably challenging, unbelievably, stimulating, that you would want to get up and do something. He made it beautiful. And that desire for eternity inside you, okay? So you've got to, you finish school, now you're starting your profession. Okay, well, it's I got to do something about it. Why? Because there is something even more than that. It is beautiful. However, death came because of sin. Death brought fear. Death brought discontinuity. Death brought separation. Death brought jealousy. Death brought confusion. Death brought lack of security. Death brought with it the loss of trust. Death brought with it self-preservation. Death brought with it survival of the fittest. Death brought with it that it's a zero-sum game. Either I or you will get it. There's no win-win with death. There's a loss for all. But then Jesus comes and chooses by his death to restore to us the choice of life. That is what this whole retreat is about. Let me say this again. Jesus comes and willfully chooses to die to restore to us again the choice of life. You remember when I talked in the beginning about being an agent?
An agent retains the power to choose. When you lose that power to choose, you become depressed. Prior to Jesus, we had no choice in our life or death.
Now with Jesus, we have that choice. He came to restore to us the choice of life. The problem with that is that still I am struggling with understanding what is life and death. The issue is not in choosing, because everyone wants to choose life. But the problem is my life, my choice at the end of my life. Even though this is a banner for advocates of euthanasia, all of us live by that banner. Unfortunately. Because we think of it as my life, my choice. But Paul didn't agree with that. Paul said, so it's not I who live, but Christ lives in me. So even though we would criticize advocates of euthanasia, unfortunately, it's sad for me to tell all of us that sometimes we live by the same principle.
They just chose to exercise their choice in ending their life, but we choose to exercise this choice in every day in how we live. You see the difference? They exercise their choice in ending their life. We exercise our choice by how we live every single day. Not realizing that that choice is, for me, a matter of life or death.
There are two kinds of players. Yesterday you guys were watching the Raptors game.
Life is a game. Life is a big game. You know why? Because it's exciting. It's very exciting. It's very stimulating. That's why we kind of wake up every morning and want to do stuff. But there are two kinds of people when they play the game. There are people who play the game to win, and there are people who play the game in order not to lose. Let me make this summary. When the world is giving us everything that is giving to us, okay, about your own self-preservation, it's motivated by don't lose. I can't give things out, okay, because otherwise you're going to lose from me and give it to you. The world plays in order not to lose. We play to win. Because we understand at the end, what is it to win? For them, the life as a life is something that is very finite, that I'm given. So there's no way I'm going to lose it. So I play in order not to lose. It's a very negative perspective. It's a very selfish perspective. It's a very individualistic perspective. It's all centered about me and what I have and what I own and what I can accomplish. But with Christ, I play to win. Life for me is exponentially growing that I may win. And above it, on top of it, what do I get? Eternal life. Very different. The self-preservationist plays in order not to lose. He hoards. They hoard what they have. They don't share. But the seed, when it dies, the seed is planting big. For whoever would save his life would lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel will save it. This is the winning strategy of the game, guys. This is the winning strategy. So what do we do at this point? Here are some steps that I hope that we can come up with in the next 2 weeks. Go back tonight please, please, I beg you, put distraction away. Put your phone away. Just put it on the side. Give yourself, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Go back and ask yourself, look back at the times in your life that you were kind of stressed out. You were expecting something and you lost it. You were hoping for something and you lost it. Somebody hurt you. Somebody was close to you, their expectations didn't match. Something at work, something at school that you were hoping for didn't happen. Somebody was sick. Somebody died. Look back at those moments in your life. Look back at your own failures. Look back at when you were supposed to do something and you failed to do it. Look back at people who were hoping from you something and you didn't do it for whatever reason. Reflect on those back again. Ask yourself the question, am I aware of why I behaved this way? Am I aware of what motivated me? Am I aware of the drives that pushed me to do this? Why and why not? Go back and do a little bit of self-examination. Try to be as honest as possible with yourself. And then come back to the current situation you're in. Whatever you're doing, you're working, you're studying, you're making money, you have a family, you're looking for, a spouse, whatever it is. Ask yourself the question, why are you doing this? You signed up for a mission trip in a couple of months. Why are you doing this? What's motivating you? And then come back and ask yourself the question, do I have enough true love? Do I understand inside me what truly is motivating me to do this? Is it to make myself feel better? Is it just for a change of scenery? Is it just because I'm bored? And somebody told me, hey, this is a good idea, do this? Because if you are doing something, if you're going to do a charity work, let's say because you're bored, trust me, within a couple of days after it, you're going to be bored again. It doesn't work that way. But then go back inside yourself and say, okay, this is me. And I would like to expand it. What do I do? The easiest way, trust me, is to find somebody around you who's been struggling, somebody around you who is going through a tough time, whether you know them or actually you just met them. And have that person be a source of your prayer. And ask God, say, God, I've actually not yet experienced that point of actually being that channel of love to this person. Would you give me that grace? Would you expand my heart? Would you expand my eyes? Give me that grace, to do it. But then the second thing I'm going to ask you after this, keep persisting in truth and honesty, praying to God until He answers you. In the meantime, start doing things. A lot of people, and I had some great discussions yesterday. Thank you all, by the way. It was amazing. Just, trust me, it was the most enjoyable part of my whole retreat is to just talk to all of you. But a lot of people kind of get into this conundrum. Do I wait until I feel something to do what I'm supposed to do? Or what happens? And I'll tell you, if you wait for a feeling to do something, you'll never do it. You'll never do it. Because if we go about just by feelings to make an action, it just doesn't happen. You pray, you clarify yourself about your intentions, and even though if you don't inside yourself feel the feeling to do that, you go ahead and do it. And you persist in your faithfulness in doing it, and trust me, God will give the feeling. I shared something, yesterday with one of you who asked me that question, and I'll make it as a confession. Over the last, 20-something years, I've been almost more than 25 mission trips. I can tell you, for the overwhelming majority of them, I never felt really excited going on the trip. I never felt really excited. In fact, it was a big burden. Every time it was like, another one. And I would actually struggle with God and say, why am I doing this? I would not dwell too much on the emotion, but I would pray about it. I would pray about it. And I would continue in my prayer. And then usually the first 1 or 2 days, I would just work. You know, because that's what I know how to do. I can't control my emotions. But I can work. I can serve. I can do what I'm supposed to do. But I'm praying. And I'm asking God, please, you know, tell me that what I'm doing is serving you. And trust me, by day 3 or 4, I usually have a revelation inside my heart from God. And it happens in many different amazing ways. Sometimes it happens with people that I personally have taken care of, and sometimes it happens with people that some of the other team have taken care of. Sometimes it happens like with one of the spiritual, you know, team who's taking care of one of the orphans, and he just says something, and that something just lights up. And I come back to God in complete humble tears and say to him, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The whole thing is to remain faithful in 2 things. In your prayer, in honestly asking God, please make this clean up. Make me do the thing for the right reason, which is glorifying your name. Make me do it for the right reason. Okay? Even though I don't understand all the circumstances, at least make me do it for the right reason. Okay? And then the second thing with the prayer, just keep working. I shared with a lot of yesterday, favorite verse from St. Paul, press on, press on. He didn't really say what to do, he's just press on. Sometimes God uses those moments to hit us on the head, and it could be a changing life of your whole career. I remember when I started, and I'll end with a story and then we'll take some questions. But I can tell you, as you start to truly struggle with God and you kind of, you know, go back and forth every day, okay, the one thing about it which is really exhausting but also really fun is that it's a very dynamic process every day. It's not just a one-time thing. It's exhausting because every day you have to come back to God and say, like, you know what, are we cool? You know, am I clean in there? Okay, am I doing it for the right reason? It's never like a one-time guarantee, hey, you're on the right track. Every day I'm revising myself. But that's really cool. Why? Because every day I get that interaction, I get that checkpoint with him. I tell him, like, you know what, I don't want to fake it with you. Because if I'm true with you, I know at the end I reach that significance that I was talking about yesterday. I've learned over so many years, when I fake it with him, I know at the end I will be empty inside me. And that significance that I'm dying for, I never find it. But when I'm truthful with him, even with all what's in me that is wrong, because he's willing to bring it up with me, and if I'm willing to work with him, eventually with my prayer and my work, eventually he changes me. So when I started doing mission trips, and I was an interventional cardiologist at that time for 4 or 5 years, and I started to get full of myself. You know, I was technically very good, you know, doing tough cases, saving lives, and, you know, one of the fun things about interventional cardiology, which is really cool, is that you get to shock people. Okay, it's so cool, because, like, you know, when you shock them, like this kind of thing, but you know what, hey, you know, you bring them back to life, so I love every time I shock somebody. But it was starting, sorry, you know, I've got a little bit of weird stuff, but that's good. But it was starting kind of to get into my head a little bit, okay? It's like, that's really cool, that's, you know, maybe I'm God, maybe, you know, I'm like, you know, I can do stuff. And my career, my understanding, my significance was starting to shift. And then that was in the very beginning when we were starting to go to Ethiopia. It was our 2nd or 3rd trip to Ethiopia. And at that time we were doing cardiac cases over there, doing interventional cardiology. And I was so kind of proud of myself that I'm serving God with my own profession. I'm saving lives in the name of God. And, like, you know, hey, hallelujah, you know, kudos for me. And then we go to Ethiopia, gathered a lot of equipment. Worked so hard to take all this equipment with us. And we go to Ethiopia, okay, where are the cases that are lined up for us? And then we find over there, anyone who's, you know, been to Third World, you'll find a lot of the fun stuff. The cath lab people went on strike. So the moment we just got there, oh, they're on strike. What do you mean they're on strike? I was like, yeah, they don't want to work. They're on strike because the government is not giving them this. So, okay, what about the patients? Oh, they could care less. Okay. All right, can I pay you money and you come to work? No, we're just trying to prove our point. So, okay, when are you guys enter your strike? Oh, we don't know. Last strike was about 3 months. It's like, oh, great! So, I stay in Addis. So we had at that time 2 teams. We had a team that was mainly internal medicine, pediatrics, and the team that had more like the surgery and the specialties. The team that had the surgery and specialties stayed in the capital, which was Addis, and the team that had the internal medicine and all that was about almost 4 hours away. At that time we said we split to both teams. So I stayed in Addis in the capital for 2-3 days just waiting that strike was going to end. And I was starting to get very frustrated, and I started to get very angry with God because like I was telling him, you're wasting my time. You could have made this happen. I could have stayed back home, just, made a ton of money this week, okay? So instead of me just sitting here doing nothing, being frustrated, and all the equipment that we got, and this sucks. And I was angry at that time with God because, like, you know what? I basically was telling God at that time, if you don't want me to come, just say it. I'm not going to come. End of story. So day 4, or actually day 3, at the end of day 3, this was like now Wednesday afternoon, I said, you know what, it doesn't look like this strike is going to end. And I might as well just go and help out instead of me sitting doing nothing for 3 days, just, being frustrated. So I go to my fellow team about 4 hours away, and I go there, and, literally speaking, I can show you the picture after this. Their line for like the internal medicine pediatrics was literally almost about a kilometer long. It was unbelievable. I say, okay, let's get to work. So I start, to do work, and I'm very bitter inside. Very bitter at it. Very bitter at why he brought me here and let this all happen. And my ego was just hurting. So we start to see patients through an interpreter, and like knowing that there's 1,000 people out there is like 5 minutes. Okay, what do you got? Like take the medication. Go, quickly. Okay, because we need to see 1,000 patients. So a lot of them, as Teresa was saying, a lot of them have back pain problems because these poor ladies, they carry on their heads just this unbelievable weight. So all of them have just unbelievable cervical spine and thoracic spine, just unbelievable pain. So most of it is mechanical, and I just give them a little bit of ibuprofen. You have not a whole lot to do. So the moment they come in, and I kind of got myself, fast. Okay, what do you have? Back pain? All right, here's the ibuprofen. Go. So at around like 5 o'clock, and I'm very tired, I am frustrated, and I'm angry at God. So at 5 o'clock, a patient comes in, and I was blind enough to even notice. How was she coming in the room? I was blind enough to notice how she looked. Talk about the story of today. So I'm multi-kida, and there's like, okay, like, Andiki mom, what do you have, mama? It's like, back pain. Okay, here's your ibuprofen. And she looks at me as like, she realizes already, like, what is this dude doing? It's like, well, what do you mean? It's like, I've been waiting, for 10 hours now for you just to do this. And I said, well, I also have some weakness. So my ears kind of perk up a little bit. It's like, what do you mean weakness? I was like, I can't walk. I'm shuffling my feet, which I didn't notice when she was coming in. I didn't even notice that her family member literally was almost carrying her coming in. I was so blind to even notice that. And it's like, I hold the cup, and I can't have a hard time even holding the cup up. I was like, so all of a sudden it's like, I'm thinking, this is something more than just back pain. There's something neurological, there's something nerve. So I do an examination, and I was like, man, like, you've got bilateral weakness in your hand, both hands are weak, both legs are weak. I was like, you've got a cord compression. You've got the spinal cord now is being compressed on. So I tell her, I was like, you've got something serious, okay? And it's more than that, you need help. And she says, yeah, I know. So I look back, it's like, what do you mean you know? He said, yes. Yeah, I had a CAT scan in Addis, which is about 4 hours away. Okay, and they told me that I have my cord is being compressed, and I'm slowly, getting to the point of paralysis. Okay, I needed surgery, so, I already know that I have a diagnosis. Okay, they told me that I needed surgery, but I don't have money for the surgery. So, I'm just, there's nothing I can do. So she had the CAT scan, and she shows me the result of the CAT scan. And I scream in her face. And I tell her, you had the CAT scan. We're in the middle of nowhere. What do you expect me to do? It's like, what can I do? You already had the CAT scan. I'm not a surgeon. I'm not a neurosurgeon. We're in the middle of nowhere. What do you expect me to do? And I really yell at her. And the lady starts tearing, and she tells me, so I have been living with this pain for the last year. I know that I'm going to be paralyzed, and I've accepted that. I've accepted that it's coming slowly. I've accepted that I'm getting weaker day by day. But I've been living with this unbelievable amount of pain, and I've been praying to God to send me someone with some pain medications. And I got the message from God that you guys are you're going to be able to help me, at least to live without pain. She said this, is it too much for me to ask to live a couple of days without pain? I've asked God for this, and I thought you were the answer. That was the slap on my face. It was the slap on my face. And it was not just about the trip, it was about everything else in my life. Because I thought for the world of me that I defined myself, I defined my success, I defined what I do and do not do to the world. I defined on God what I will contribute with and what I would not. I put the terms. I'm only willing to work in this capacity. But God was willing to shut down completely my plans and shut down the cath lab completely. Okay? And by the way, and here's the interesting thing. God would have given her the medicine with one of the other docs who were there. It was not me that gave her the medicine, because any one of the other docs would have given her the medicine. But God got me in this situation just to give me a slap on my face. At a time when my career was defining who I was and how I wanted to interact with God, at that time he slapped me on my face and made it very clear. You don't define yourself or your relationship with God or what you offer to God by your career or by your technical ability or by your wealth or by what you're famous about. That me doesn't define what you do with God. And it was a huge slap on my face. And I looked at her and I said, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have even, what am I doing yelling at her in the middle of nowhere? But her answer at that time, was it too much for me to live a couple of days without pain? Was what God gave me at that point to wake up. The bottom line, guys and gals, God gives us a lot of messages. God gives us a lot of slaps on our face. God gives us a lot of also encouragement. God gives us a lot of doors that are open. The problem is that we are either too distracted or too self-focused on me that we're not letting that happen. We're not letting that happen. So my prayer for all of you at the end of this retreat is to go back in yourselves. Look back at those learning moments. Look back at those lessons, those teaching moments in your life. Look back at the times when you were hurt most. Look back at the times when you were frustrated most with yourself or with the people around you. Look back at those moments. Look back at the moments that God maybe gave you an encouragement and you just brushed it off too quickly. Okay? Look back at those. Learn from those. Bring it to your current situation. And go and ask yourself in everything that you do, in your family relationships, in your work relationships, in your service, in who you serve, in your initiatives, okay? And ask yourselves, do I have the right motive? Do I have the right intention? Do I have everything that is aligned, okay, with God? Am I clear that I'm doing this? Am I doing this for any reason that could potentially or possibly be self-reflecting on me? Because if that's the case, ask yourself twice. And even if it's not clear from the very beginning, because a lot of times it's not, the only thing you can do is two things. Keep praying and be honest with yourself. Over time, God never, ever, 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 ever lets down a person who honestly keeps praying persistently over and over for clearance. The problem is that we pray one time and then we just move on with our lives. But persistence pays off. You know the visitor in the middle of the night? You know that parable? What if I told you, take that parable and apply it on yourself in asking God for an honest answer to your life desires, to an honest answer to your life plans and actions. And then the next thing, go back and see what can you do, what can you expand on. Look around. Trust me, if you go to any inner city, I say this a lot in America because it's a disaster. In America right now, the gap between the poor and the rich is just getting worse. And the people who are really struggling in the inner cities, you know what? They're very bitter at white America. You know what? Because white America, a lot of it is rich evangelicals. It's rich Christians. Okay? And this gap is just unreal. Now let me ask you guys a question. Do you guys think that God allowed in this day and age of human civilization that mass immigration would happen? So that thousands of Copts would come to the US and Canada to live, quote unquote, the American or the Canadian dream? Do you really think so? That God was really wanting us to live that dream of prosperity. And He brought us all the way. He made the persecution really intensify in Egypt. As far as I can tell, if I look at it from a biblical perspective, the only time when the persecution intensified, the disciples spread out and they spread Christianity. It was not a prosperity gospel for them. It was a gospel that ended up they died for. Okay? So do you really think that God planned in the last 60, 70 years that has never happened? This has never happened before, because like this kind of mass immigration, okay, never happened in the history of civilization like the way that we see it right now. But do you really think that He made this happen so that all of us as a second generation or first generation or third generation Coptic, who are very successful, very accomplished, some of the most accomplished people that you would ever see in all sorts of professions, some of the most, driven. Do you really think He made this so that we just live a dream that belongs to this world? I don't think so. I don't think so. We have a calling to look around us and go back. Teach people how to live by our choice of how we die. Teach people how to live by our choice of how we die. That is the whole retreat. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. George Tadros, for